The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Emma, you're disposable. We can find someone else to do your job for half the price. My boss Richard leaned back in his leather chair, not even looking at me as he delivered the news. After 3 years of 60-hour weeks, missed family dinners, and turning his failing marketing firm into something profitable, this was my reward. Budget cuts, he said with a shrug. Nothing personal. But it felt personal. Very personal. I'd built the client relationships. I'd created the campaigns that saved his company. I'd worked weekends while he played golf. And now, just like that, I was disposable. You have until Friday to clean out your desk, Richard added, finally looking up from his phone. Security will escort you out. My hands shook as I signed the termination papers. 3 years of my life, reduced to a box of personal items and a pathetic severance check that wouldn't cover 2 months of rent. As I walked to my car, his words echoed in my head. Disposable. Like I was nothing more than a used tissue. He had no idea what he'd just unleashed. The first week after being fired was the hardest. I applied to dozens of jobs, each rejection email feeling like another kick while I was down. My savings account dwindled as rent and bills kept coming. My best friend Jessica tried to cheer me up over coffee. You're better off without that toxic place, she said. Richard never appreciated you anyway. She was right, but that didn't pay my bills. Then, 2 weeks after my firing, I saw the job posting. My exact position at Richard's company, posted on LinkedIn. Same responsibilities, same requirements, but the salary range made my blood boil. They were offering $30,000 less than what I'd been making. So Richard had lied. This wasn't about budget cuts. This was about replacing me with someone cheaper, someone he could push around and underpay. I screenshotted the posting before it disappeared. Evidence of his lie. But more than that, it was fuel for the fire building inside me. Richard thought he could discard me like garbage and move on. He thought I'd just fade away quietly, lick my wounds, and find another job. He was wrong. I started watching Richard's company like a hawk. Following their social media, checking their website for updates, even driving by the office occasionally. I told myself it was just curiosity. But deep down, I knew I was looking for an opening. That opening came sooner than expected. 3 weeks after my termination, I saw them announce their biggest client presentation ever. Hartwell Industries was considering switching marketing firms, and Richard's company was one of 3 finalists. The contract was worth $2 million over 3 years. It was exactly the kind of account I used to handle. I knew Hartwell's CEO, Patricia Chen, from industry events. We'd always had good conversations about marketing strategy and business growth. But here's what Richard didn't know. Hartwell was also considering Pinnacle Marketing, the firm across town. And I happened to know Pinnacle's owner, David Kim, from my college days. A plan started forming in my mind. Richard wanted to replace me with someone cheaper? Fine. But he was about to learn that some things can't be replaced so easily. I picked up my phone and dialed David's number. David, it's Emma Rodriguez. I have a proposition for you. David and I met at a quiet coffee shop downtown. He looked tired but interested as I explained my situation. Richard Blackwell fired you? He said, shaking his head. That guy's been struggling for years. You were the only reason his company stayed afloat. Exactly, I said. And now he's going after your biggest prospect. David leaned forward. Hartwell Industries. Yeah, we're presenting next week. But honestly, Emma, I'm worried. Richard's company has more resources, more flashy presentations. We're just a small firm. That's when I made my offer. What if I told you exactly what Hartwell wants to hear? What if I gave you inside information about their business challenges, their goals, their decision-making process? David's eyes widened. You'd do that? Richard called me disposable, I said, feeling the anger rise in my chest again. He threw away 3 years of loyalty like it was nothing. He lied about budget cuts while posting my job for half my salary. So yes, I'd do that. We shook hands across the table. David would get the information he needed to craft the perfect presentation, and I would get my revenge. Richard was about to discover that some people aren't as disposable as he thought. The next morning, I called Patricia Chen directly. We'd always had a good working relationship, and she was happy to hear from me. Emma, I heard about your situation at Blackwell Marketing. Richard's loss is someone else's gain, I'm sure. Actually, that's why I'm calling, I said carefully. I know you're looking at marketing firms right now. I can't make the decision for you, but I thought you might want to know about some concerns I have. Patricia was immediately interested. What kind of concerns? I told her about Richard's staff turnover, his tendency to overpromise and underdeliver, and most importantly, his new habit of hiring inexperienced staff to cut costs. The person handling your account won't have the experience to understand your industry challenges, I explained. They're trying to do everything on the cheap now. Patricia was quiet for a moment. That's concerning. What would you recommend? Take a serious look at Pinnacle Marketing, I said. David Kim runs a tight ship, and he really understands complex B2B relationships. Plus, he won't make promises he can't keep. After we hung up, I felt a mix of satisfaction and guilt. But then I remembered Richard's smug face as he called me disposable. The guilt disappeared pretty quickly. I spent the weekend preparing a detailed brief for David about Hartwell Industries. Everything I knew about their business challenges, their corporate culture, their decision-making process. Information that would take months of research to gather normally. I knew Patricia was worried about their upcoming product launch. I knew they needed help with digital transformation. I knew their budget constraints and their growth goals. Most importantly, I knew exactly how they liked to be pitched to. When I delivered the file to David on Monday morning, his jaw dropped. This is incredible, Emma. How did you gather all this? 3 years of relationship building, I said. The kind of relationship building Richard thought was disposable. David studied the documents. With this information, we can create a presentation that speaks directly to their needs. We can address every concern before they even voice it. That's the idea, I said. As I drove home, I thought about Richard preparing for his presentation. He probably felt confident, secure in his advantages. He had no idea that his biggest asset, me, was now working for the competition. Soon he'd learn what it felt like to be replaced. The presentations were scheduled for Thursday. David had worked around the clock to prepare, using every piece of information I'd given him. Meanwhile, I'd been monitoring Richard's company through LinkedIn and social media. His new hire, a recent college graduate named Tyler, was clearly struggling. I could see it in the stressed posts from other employees, the late-night office photos, the general chaos. Richard was about to present the biggest pitch of his company's life, with an inexperienced team and no understanding of what Hartwell really needed. On Wednesday night, David called me. Emma, I can't thank you enough. Our presentation is solid. We're addressing every single one of their pain points. What about Richard's pitch? I asked. From what I heard, they're going with their standard template approach. Lots of flashy graphics, generic promises, nothing specific to Hartwell's industry. Perfect. Richard was walking into a disaster of his own making. The next morning, I found myself parked across from Hartwell's office building. I told myself I was just curious, but really, I needed to see this moment for myself. I needed to watch Richard learn what disposable really meant. Richard arrived first, 30 minutes early with his small team. I recognized Tyler, the kid who'd replaced me, looking nervous and carrying a stack of presentation materials. Richard looked confident, almost cocky, as they walked into the building. 20 minutes later, David arrived with his team. They looked calm and prepared. David caught my eye through the window and gave me a small nod. The presentations were scheduled to last an hour each. Richard went first. I waited in my car, checking my phone, trying to look casual. Other people came and went from the building, but all I could think about was what was happening on the 15th floor. After exactly 1 hour, Richard and his team emerged. Even from across the street, I could see the disappointment on their faces. Tyler looked like he might cry. Richard was talking rapidly into his phone, probably trying to do damage control. They'd clearly bombed. 30 minutes later, David's presentation began. I knew it would go differently. I knew they'd connect with Patricia in ways Richard never could, because I'd made sure of it. David called me that evening, his voice filled with excitement. Emma, we got it. We got the Hartwell account. I felt a surge of satisfaction mixed with something else. Justice, maybe. Patricia said our presentation was exactly what they needed to hear, David continued. She said we understood their business better than firms they'd been working with for years. That's wonderful, David. You deserve it. We both know I couldn't have done it without you. Emma, I want to offer you a position here. Senior Account Director, full benefits, 20% more than you were making at Blackwell. I was quiet for a moment. A new job, a fresh start, and revenge served cold. I accept, I said. After we hung up, I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my balcony. Somewhere across town, Richard was probably trying to figure out what went wrong. How his sure thing had turned into a disaster. He'd called me disposable. But tonight, he was learning that some people are harder to replace than others. The news spread quickly through the marketing community. Hartwell Industries choosing Pinnacle Marketing over the larger, more established firms was big news. I started at Pinnacle the following Monday. David had given me a corner office and a team of 3 talented people. It felt good to be valued again, to work for someone who appreciated what I brought to the table. But the best part was watching Richard's company struggle. Without the Hartwell contract, they were in serious financial trouble. I heard through industry contacts that they'd been counting on that revenue to cover their overhead for the next year. Within 2 weeks, Richard had to lay off half his staff. The irony wasn't lost on me. The man who'd fired me for budget cuts was now making real budget cuts. Tyler, the kid who'd replaced me, was among the first to go. I felt bad for him. He'd just been trying to start his career. But Richard? Richard got exactly what he deserved. The local business journal ran a small article about Blackwell Marketing's restructuring. They didn't mention the failed Hartwell presentation, but everyone in the industry knew what had really happened. 3 weeks into my new job, Richard called me. I almost didn't answer. His name on my phone screen brought back all the anger and humiliation from that day in his office, but curiosity won out. Emma, he said, his voice strained. I heard you're working at Pinnacle now. That's right, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Look, I know things ended badly between us, but I'm wondering, would you consider coming back? I can offer you a partnership track, equity in the company. We need someone with your experience. The audacity was breathtaking. 3 months ago, I was disposable. Now suddenly, he needed me desperately. Richard, I said slowly, I'm very happy where I am. Emma, please, the company is struggling. I made a mistake letting you go. Barrett, we can work something out. A mistake? I repeated. You called me disposable. You said you could find someone to do my job for half the price. How did that work out for you? The silence on the other end was deafening. I was wrong, he finally admitted. You weren't disposable. You were essential. I could have hung up right then, could have let him twist in the wind, but I wanted to hear him say it all. Tell me about Tyler, I said. The person who replaced me. How's he working out? Another long pause. Tyler's no longer with the company. Budget cuts? I asked, using his own words against him. Emma, please, I know I was wrong. I'm trying to apologize here. You're not apologizing, Richard. You're begging. There's a difference. Fine, yes, I'm begging. Is that what you want to hear? I need you back. The company is falling apart without someone who actually knows what they're doing. That's when I delivered the final blow. Richard, I have some advice for you. When you find yourself in a hole, stop digging. You called me disposable, fired me with no warning, and replaced me with someone cheaper. Now you want me to come back and save you? I'll make it worth your while. You can't afford me anymore, I said. David values my work. He pays me 20% more than you ever did, treats me like a partner, and actually appreciates what I bring to the table. The silence stretched out between us. But more than that, Richard, I'm happy here. I'm working with clients who respect me, on campaigns that matter. Why would I go back to a sinking ship? The company doesn't have to sink, Emma, with your help. The company is sinking because of your decisions. You prioritized cheap over quality. You threw away years of relationship building for short-term savings. You created this mess. I could hear him breathing heavily on the other end of the line. You know what the funny thing is, Richard? You were right about one thing. You did find someone to do my job for half the price. How's that working out for your bottom line? Emma, I have to go now. I have actual work to do. For a boss who doesn't think I'm disposable. I hung up and sat back in my chair, smiling for the first time since this whole thing started. Outside my office window, I could see the city skyline. Somewhere out there, Richard was probably panicking, trying to figure out how to save his company. But that wasn't my problem anymore. Over the next month, I threw myself into my work at Pinnacle. The Hartwell account was going better than anyone expected. Patricia Chen had become not just a client but a real advocate for our work. "You know, Emma," she said during one of our weekly check-ins, "I'm so glad we went with Pinnacle. The difference between your approach and what other firms were offering was night and day." "What do you mean?" I asked, though I suspected I knew. "Well, Blackwell Marketing gave us this generic presentation that could have been for any company. No understanding of our challenges, no specific solutions. It was like they hadn't even researched us." "That's disappointing," I said, trying to hide my satisfaction. "But your team came in with solutions tailored exactly to our needs. You understood our industry, our goals, our timeline. It was like you'd been working with us for years." If only she knew. The Hartwell campaign was already showing results. Their product launch was getting great media coverage, their digital transformation was ahead of schedule, and their quarterly revenue was up 15%. Success breeds success in the marketing world, and soon other companies were asking about Pinnacle's services. Meanwhile, Richard's company continued its downward spiral. I heard through the grapevine that they'd lost 2 more major clients, both citing concerns about service quality and staff turnover. The Business Journal ran another article, this one titled "Local Marketing Firm Faces Uncertain Future." They interviewed several former clients who expressed disappointment with recent work quality. One quote stood out: "They used to have this amazing account director who really understood our business. After she left, the service just wasn't the same." They were talking about me, though they didn't mention my name. I felt a complex mix of emotions reading that article. Vindication, certainly. But also a strange kind of sadness. I'd spent 3 years building that company's reputation, forming relationships, creating work I was proud of. Richard had thrown it all away because he thought he could replace me with someone cheaper. Now he was learning that some things can't be replaced. Some relationships can't be rebuilt. Some trust, once broken, stays broken. His company wasn't just losing money, it was losing its reputation, its client base, its future. 2 months after the Hartwell presentation, David called me into his office with exciting news. "Emma, I just got off the phone with Morrison Industries. They want to meet with us about handling their entire marketing portfolio. It's a $3 million account." Morrison Industries was one of the biggest companies in the city. Landing them would put Pinnacle on the map as a major player. "That's incredible, David. How did they hear about us?" "Patricia Chen recommended us. Apparently, she's been bragging about our work to everyone who'll listen." The irony was perfect. Richard's lost client was now bringing us even bigger opportunities. "There's more," David continued. "Morrison specifically asked for you to lead the pitch. They've heard about your work with Hartwell and want to see what you can do for them." As I prepared for the Morrison presentation, I couldn't help but think about Richard. His company had been Morrison's marketing firm for 5 years. But like everything else in his business, that relationship was apparently falling apart too. They were looking for someone new. Someone who wouldn't call them disposable when things got tough. The Morrison presentation was scheduled for the following week. I spent days researching their business, understanding their challenges, crafting a strategy that would speak directly to their needs. It was the kind of thorough preparation I'd always done at Richard's company. The kind of work he'd taken for granted until it was gone. The night before the presentation, Richard called me again. "Emma, I heard about Morrison Industries. Please tell me you're not going after our account." "Your account?" I said. "I thought they were looking for new representation." "We've had some challenges, but we're working through them. They're still our client." "Are they?" "Because from what I heard, they're interviewing other firms. That usually means they're not happy with their current agency." "Emma, please. If we lose Morrison, we're done. The company will have to close." For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. But then I remembered his words. "You're disposable. We can find someone else to do your job for half the price." "Richard, you made your choice 3 months ago. You decided I was disposable. You decided to prioritize cheap over quality. These are just the consequences of that decision. I was wrong. Yes, you were. And now you get to live with it. The Morrison presentation went perfectly. My team and I connected with their executives immediately, presenting solutions that addressed their specific challenges and goals. The CEO, Robert Morrison, was impressed. "This is exactly the kind of strategic thinking we've been missing," he said. "You understand our business in a way our current agency never has." After the formal presentation, Robert pulled me aside. "Emma, I have to ask. Did you work at Blackwell Marketing before joining Pinnacle?" "I did," I said carefully. "I thought so. The quality difference is remarkable. Richard's team has been phoning it in for months. Generic strategies, missed deadlines, no real understanding of our industry. I'm sorry to hear that." "Don't be sorry. We should have made a change sooner. We were just comfortable with the status quo, you know? But comfort isn't the same as success." 2 days later, David got the call. Morrison Industries was terminating their contract with Blackwell Marketing and signing with Pinnacle. Richard's biggest client was gone, and I was the one who'd taken them. The news hit the marketing community like a bombshell. Morrison Industries leaving Blackwell Marketing for Pinnacle was the kind of story that people talked about over lunch and shared in industry forums. Richard's company had lost both Hartwell and Morrison within 3 months. Without those anchor clients, they simply couldn't survive. The Business Journal ran a longer article this time. "Marketing firm Blackwell closes after losing major clients." They interviewed Richard, who tried to put a positive spin on the closure. "Sometimes businesses evolve," he was quoted as saying. "We're exploring new opportunities and different approaches to serving clients." But everyone in the industry knew what had really happened. Richard had prioritized short-term savings over long-term relationships. He'd called experienced staff disposable and replaced them with cheaper alternatives. The market had responded accordingly. I felt empty, somehow, reading about the closure. I'd wanted Richard to fail, but seeing it actually happen was different than I'd expected. Then I remembered Tyler, the kid who'd replaced me. He'd lost his job twice now because of Richard's poor decisions. That wasn't fair. I called David. "David, there's a young guy named Tyler Chen who used to work for Richard. He's actually talented, just inexperienced. Think we could bring him in as a junior associate?" Tyler was grateful for the opportunity and turned out to be a quick learner. Having someone else from Richard's company gave me insight into just how bad things had gotten there. "It was chaos," Tyler told me over coffee. "After you left, nothing worked right. Clients were unhappy, deadlines were missed, and Richard was always stressed and angry." "What about the other staff members?" I asked. "Most of them quit or got laid off. By the end, it was just Richard and one secretary trying to handle everything." I felt bad for the innocent people who'd lost their jobs because of Richard's decisions. But I didn't feel bad about what I'd done. Richard had made his choices. He'd called me disposable, lied about budget cuts, and tried to replace loyalty with cheaper alternatives. The market had simply shown him the real value of what he'd thrown away. Meanwhile, Pinnacle was thriving. With the Hartwell and Morrison accounts, plus several new clients who'd heard about our work, we'd tripled in size. David was talking about opening a second office. "Emma," he said one afternoon, "I want to make you a partner. Full equity, your name on the door. What do you say?" 6 months after Richard called me disposable, my name was on the door of Rodriguez and Kim Marketing. David and I had restructured the company as equal partners, and our client list was better than I'd ever dared hope. Patricia Chen from Hartwell sent a congratulations card. "So proud to see someone who truly understands client service getting the recognition she deserves." Robert Morrison from Morrison Industries called personally. "Emma, you've transformed how we think about marketing. We're lucky to have you as a partner." Even Tyler had found his footing, developing into a promising account coordinator with fresh ideas and genuine enthusiasm. But the best moment came when Jessica, my best friend, took me out for a celebration dinner. "I have to ask," she said over dessert, "do you feel bad about what happened to Richard's company?" I thought about it carefully. I feel bad for the people who lost their jobs because of his poor decisions. I feel bad that he destroyed relationships I'd spent years building. But do I feel bad about the consequences of his actions? No. He really brought it on himself, didn't he? He called me disposable, Jess. He lied about budget cuts while posting my job for half my salary. He thought he could throw away years of loyalty and relationship building for short-term savings. I paused, twirling my wine glass. He learned that some people aren't as replaceable as he thought. A year later, I was driving through downtown when I saw Richard at a coffee shop. He looked older, tired, wearing a wrinkled shirt instead of his usual expensive suits. I could have kept driving, should have probably, but curiosity got the better of me. I parked and went inside. "Richard," I said, approaching his table. He looked up, startled. "Emma, hi. How are you doing?" He gestured to his laptop and the stack of resumes beside it. "Job hunting, it's humbling." We stood there awkwardly for a moment. "I heard about your success," he said finally. "Rodriguez and Kim Marketing, partner at 32. That's impressive." "Thank you. I also heard you hired Tyler. That was kind of you." "He's a good kid. He deserved better than getting caught up in other people's mistakes." Richard winced at that. "Emma, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt people, including you. If I could go back and do things differently." "But you can't," I said gently. "None of us can." He nodded, looking down at his hands. "I called you disposable. That was wrong. You were the best thing about that company, and I threw it away." "Why?" I asked. "Why did you do it?" Richard was quiet for a long moment. "Panic, I guess. The company was struggling, clients were demanding lower prices, and I thought I could cut costs without losing quality." "But you knew I brought value. You knew my relationships with clients were what kept the company afloat." "I did know that, but I convinced myself that anyone could do what you did, that it was just about following processes and procedures." He laughed bitterly. "I learned how wrong I was pretty quickly. Richard, what you did wasn't just a business mistake. You betrayed someone who'd been loyal to you for 3 years. You lied about the reasons. You made me feel worthless." "I know, and I'm sorry. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am truly sorry." I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. But he just looked broken, defeated. "I forgive you," I said, surprising myself. "Not because you deserve it, but because holding on to anger was exhausting." His eyes widened. "Really? Really? But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean there shouldn't be consequences." We talked for another 10 minutes. Richard told me about his job search, how difficult it was to explain the failure of his company to potential employers, how the marketing community was small and word got around. "I'm probably going to have to leave the city," he said. "Start over somewhere else, maybe in a different industry." "Maybe that's for the best," I said. As I prepared to leave, Richard stopped me. "Emma, can I ask you something?" "Sure." Did you have anything to do with what happened, with losing Hartwell and Morrison?" I looked at him for a long moment. He deserved honesty. "Yes," I said simply. He nodded slowly. "I thought so. How?" "I gave Pinnacle information about what those clients really needed, information your new team didn't have and couldn't get. Information you'd gathered while working for me. Information I'd gathered through years of relationship building that you thought was disposable." Richard was quiet, processing this. "I can't even be mad about it," he said finally. "It's exactly what I deserved." "Yes," I said. "It is." Walking back to my car, I reflected on the conversation. A year ago, I'd been devastated, sitting in that same parking garage with a box of my belongings and a severance check that barely covered my rent. Richard had called me disposable and replaced me with someone cheaper. He'd thought my years of loyalty, my client relationships, my expertise could all be easily replicated by a recent graduate willing to work for half my salary. He'd been wrong. The relationships I'd built, the knowledge I'd gained, the trust I'd earned, none of that was disposable. It was valuable, irreplaceable, and portable. When Richard threw me away, he didn't just lose an employee. He lost his competitive advantage, his client relationships, and ultimately his entire business. I'd helped his biggest competitor win the accounts that kept his company afloat. I'd shown the market exactly what they'd lost when they decided I was disposable. The revenge had been perfect, complete, and entirely deserved. Now, driving back to my own company, Rodriguez and Kim Marketing, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. The anger was gone, burned away by success and vindication. Richard had taught me an important lesson, though not the one he'd intended. He'd shown me my own worth by trying to deny it. I wasn't disposable, I never had been. And now everyone knew it. He called me disposable, so I made him replaceable.